Hello again, Gills fans. Welcome back to the latest episode of Gills in the Blood TV, and it is that time of the year where I look back on the campaign that was with my season review. I'm going to keep the format similar to what I did for the 2019-20 campaign. I'm going to split it into categories and do it in a top three format. There will be 6 categories in total, including a summary. Category number 1 is going all the way back to last summer, and top 3 signings. In reverse order, at number 3, I'm going to go for the recently departed Jordan Graham. The winger arrived on a free transfer, having been on loan for the second part of the 19-20 campaign, which was unfortunately cut short because of the COVID pandemic. But he was absolutely brilliant throughout 2021. Contributed, I think, 13 goals and 12 assists in his time with the club. He was a constant threat to any fullback that he came up against. Like I say, 13 goals, 12 assists. Really good player. Technically one of the best in the division. Probably too good for us. Probably too good for League One. And it looks like he's going to get a well-earned move to the Championship. So at number 3 for me is Jordan Graham. Number 2 was the club's player of the year, and that was the skipper, Kyle Dempsey. He could easily have been number 1, but I went on goals. So that's your little clue for who the number 1's going to be. But Dempsey himself was absolutely superb. Picked up an injury at the beginning of the campaign in the first league game of the season against Hull, unfortunately, which meant he missed a period. But after that, he was absolutely spot on for pretty much the entire campaign. Contributed 8 goals and 5 assists in all competitions. I think 4 of them were from outside of the box. There was a set piece against Swindon. There was a set piece against Northampton. Really good strikes against Accrington and Wimbledon and Crewe. A really good player at this level. Makes you wonder again why Joey Barton thought it was right to let him leave on a free transfer. But their loss was certainly our gain. My number 2 signing of the season, the captain, Kyle Dempsey. Number 1, I've probably already given it away when I mentioned Kyle Dempsey in the previous part of the video. I said I'd gone for goals, which had swung it in this man's favour. The big front man, Verdane Oliver, arrived in the summer to little fanfare. Only 4 goals for Northampton last season in the regular season, but was very good as they won promotion via the League 2 playoffs. Turned up at us. At first, I thought he was very workmanlike. I thought he'd score probably 8-10 goals and contribute a few assists. But he had that incredible purple patch throughout March, didn't he? Where he scored 8 goals in as many games. He scored on the final day before having to go off injured, which took him to the magical 20-goal mark. And he ended up as our top scorer from Jordan Graham, who was second with 12. Well-deserved top signing of the season for me. Big V for Dane Oliver. Second category is top performances / victories, and there were plenty of them throughout the campaign as we went toe-to-toe with the very best that League One could offer. Despite some frustrating performances at home and away, my top 3 performances all come on the road. Number 3 top performance came for me way back in the middle of December when we had to go up north with a patched up team. We had no Jordan Graham available through injury. Verdane Oliver, who went on to be top scorer, was only fit enough for the bench. And I think 2 or 3 of those on the substitutes bench were only there to make up the numbers and couldn't really come on. We won 4-1. John Akindi was absolutely unplayable. Robbie McKenzie turned into a number 10 for 90 minutes and scored his only goal of the campaign. Could have had another in the 90 minutes as well. Scott Robinson came within a deflection of his only goal for the club, but unfortunately it went down for Conor Ogilvie. And the only frustration was a late concession in injury time, but it took nothing away from what was a really good team display against the odds as we saw off Rochdale by 4-1. Number 2 came at Sincil Bank when we was on that incredible run throughout March as we threatened to gate crash the top 6 for a while, and that was the 3-0 victory away to Lincoln City. Lincoln, who are now in the playoffs. They were in the playoffs at the time but not in the best of form, but that takes nothing away from the Gills' performance that night. Goals from Verdane Oliver, Kyle Dempsey and Jordan Graham from the penalty spot sealed a really good win. Really good clean sheet for the goalkeeper and defensive players, and yeah, for me, it's right up there in terms of our best performances in recent seasons. Yes, Lincoln were out of form, but they still had plenty of good players. They were still a good side, and we went in there and we absolutely dismantled them from start to finish, and it could have been more than 3. Just edging out our 3-0 win at Lincoln City in terms of performance and result of the season was a 1-0 win on the road at London Road, actually, against the team that went up in second place behind league champions Hull City. And that was our 1-0 win over Peterborough just a few weeks ago. We went up there, we started really bright, we were on the front foot. If you was a neutral and didn't know which team was chasing automatic promotion, you wouldn't have known the difference. We were that good. We scored just before half time through a right-footed drive from Connor Ogilvie, and then second half we managed the game really well. We defended resolutely as a unit, we were a threat on the break, and we saw it out relatively comfortably. So for me, the team performance of the season came at London Road, and it was Peterborough 0, Gillingham 1. Next section is top 3 memories, and obviously this is a little bit difficult this season because we've spent the entire campaign watching the boys on a laptop and on a TV screen, but I have picked 3 and they're coming up now. Number 3 top memory for me this season was 2 gifts that I received. Firstly, I was lucky enough to receive in this past week a signed match-worn shirt from our top scorer, Verdane Oliver. It was his way of saying thank you for my support throughout the season. Verdane didn't have to do that. He reached out to me and asked if he could have my address, and it's certainly something that I wasn't expecting, and it's certainly something that I don't do the channel or the Twitter page for. So a really nice touch from big Verdane Oliver, and for me it says that he's an even better bloke than he is a footballer, and that takes some doing. Also, back in November, I had a knock on my front door from Bos and Stocky, and they had turned up with the help of Jim, who runs the Gillingham Legends page, and they were generous enough to have sorted out a Legends print with me on it, which you can see in the background of this video. So thank you to Bos and Stocky and to Jim for that. I was having a tough time back in the autumn and early winter, and that really was a well-needed pick-me-up. My second choice in terms of memories for the season is not one that you'd think I would have picked, and that was me basically having a mental breakdown in the middle of the season. Throughout the campaign, it had been tough for all of us, and we'd not been able to go to games because of coronavirus. We'd not been able to see our friends. We'd not been able to meet up with people that we see on a weekly basis when we go to watch the Gills home and away. And it all got on top of me, the COVID pandemic, and I had to stop doing the channel. I stopped doing the Twitter page for about a month. Just had to take time away from absolutely everything. But all the messages and tweets of support that I got throughout that time will live me for a long time. And I do appreciate each and every single one of them. But yeah, a mental breakdown in the middle of the season was not ideal when there was no release and no way of having any sort of distractions from what was going on in the world. My number 1 memory for the season is something that I think has been really important throughout the campaign because we've not been able to go to stadiums and cheer on our boys. And that is the player interaction that has gone on between the likes of Carl Dempsey, the likes of Jordan Graham, the likes of Verdane Oliver, the likes of Ryan Jackson and the supporter base this season. A lot of them have been really good, taken the time to message, taken the time to tweet, taken the time to reply when we've been tweeting them, congratulating them on good performances and good results. And I think it's really great to see. And fingers crossed that when we do get back in stadiums, that kind of interaction does continue after this COVID pandemic's passed and everything has returned to something approaching normal. Next up is top 3 goals. Number 1 is an absolute gimme, but we'll get to that in a minute. But my top 3 are as follows. In third place is Carl Dempsey's match-winning strike at Accrington Stanley at the turn of the year. We just bought in some new players in a loan reshuffle in the January transfer window. We went up there, they were still chasing the playoffs at the time, John Coleman's side. We were really good from start to finish, and we earned the victory with this really good team, Cole. Alex McDonald had the ball just inside his own after Callum Slattery had done well to pinch possession. He pinged a delicious 50-60 yard ball over the back of the fullback for Jordan Graham on the left-hand side. He cut inside his man. Alex McDonald didn't stop his run, burst into the box. Jordan Graham found him with a ball fizzed into feet, and Alex McDonald's touch killed it dead on the edge of the penalty area. Carl Dempsey ran onto it and wrapped his foot around it first time into the far corner. A brilliant goal to cap a brilliant performance and a brilliant 3 points. At number 2 for me was another brilliant counter-attacking goal from the Gills, and this one involved Jordan Graham, Ryan Jackson, Carl Dempsey, and was finished off by top scorer Verdane Oliver at home to Ipswich in our 3-1 win at the start of March. Ryan Jackson did well to pinch the ball off of the left winger in his right back position. He then managed to feed Jordan Graham, who drove over the halfway line. A little ball was given to Carl Dempsey, and then there was a 1-2 played as we got into the Ipswich half. Graham managed to release Dempsey down the right-hand side, and Verdane Oliver, who not 30 seconds before had been doing his defensive duty on the edge of his own penalty area, lung-bursting run to meet it on the first time half volley from about 8 or 9 yards and guide it into the far corner. Our former stopper, Thomas Holy, had no chance, and then Verdane capped it with another really good goal to cap off a really good performance and a 3-1 Gills win. Best goal of the season, though, is pretty obvious, and that was Conor Ogilvy's absolutely outrageous volley that put us 2-1 up at the Valley back in February en route to a 3-2 win, and did win the official club goal of the season award, meaning that Conor has won that very accolade for the past 2 seasons. I think there was a long ball played down the middle, which eventually made its way out to Carl Dempsey on the right-hand side. He recycled possession and got a good ball into the box. It was headed clear by one of the Charlton centre-halves, but Ollie Lee showed great awareness to flick a little ball over Darren Pratley, I think it was. And then the connection was as sweet as anything from Conor, full on the volley from about 35 yards. Ben Amos was polite enough to dive, but I think if there'd been 3 of him in the goal, he still wouldn't have got anywhere near it. A deserving winner of goal of the season. My top strike, Conor Ogilvy at Charlton. Next section is to give some credit to those players that are a little bit unsung and go a little bit under the radar. And this is my top 3 underrated players of the season. In third place, a player that's been with us for 2 seasons and is very good at what he does. He's the enforcer in the middle of the park, the player that breaks up play and then gives it to those that can go and work their magic in the final third. And I think it's important to say that we realised how much we missed him when he wasn't there during the first half of the campaign. So number 3 underrated player of the season for me is Stuart O'Keefe. Came back earlier than expected from that leg break back in January, and we won around 45% of our league games after he returned, as we attempted to get in the playoffs, albeit unsuccessfully. I think he picked up about 712 bookings in the last 2 months of the season, as he'd already passed the cut-off point for accumulation, which would have led to a 2-game ban. But yeah, Stuart O'Keefe, pivotal in everything that we do, and one of the real unsung heroes. Number 2 for me is Robbie Cundy, who came in on loan from Bristol City back in the January transfer window, having spent the first half of the campaign on loan at eventual promotion winners in League 2, Cambridge United. He provided some real consistency and continuity at the heart of defence. He gave Jack Tucker a regular partner, which was something that he'd really lacked in the first half of the campaign, and it showed in the performances. From 18 games that Robbie featured in between January and the end of the season, I think we won 8. Which was an excellent return. I think we kept about 5 or 6 clean sheets in that time as well. And Robbie notched his first goal in senior football in that 3-2 defeat at Oxford, which ultimately cost us a place in the playoffs. But number 2 for me in terms of unsung heroes, Robbie Cundy. Number 1 for me is a player that was in and out the side during the first half of the campaign, but from the turn of the year onwards, he cemented his place on the left-hand side and was a real pivotal part and vital cog in our ultimately doomed playoff push, and that is Alex McDonald. He may have only scored 1 goal this season, that really sweet right-footed drive to give us a point at Sunderland back in January, but he provided 5 assists in all competitions, I believe, and his work rate and tenacity off the ball was infectious. I've said in my player ratings blog recently that every squad needs a Macca, a player that will play anywhere for you, will run through a brick wall for the cause, and ultimately do everything that you ask of him. And during the second half of the campaign, I think Alex McDonald's done that and a little bit more. Harshly bought off a few times when he was having good games, but that was only because Steve Evans and Paul Rayner were trying to change games and get more offensive players onto the pitch. But my most underrated player for the season award goes to Alex McDonald. To sum up the season, I think if someone had said to me back in the summer, you won't go and watch a game for the entire campaign in the stadium, but Gills will finish 10th, I, number 1, wouldn't have believed you in terms of not being back at the Priestfield for 14, 15 months, but I'd have probably snapped your hand off for another top 10 finish. Steve Evans and Paul Rayner continue to do a really good job on a really limited budget with a very small playing squad. Some of the performances have been absolutely top draw, haven't they? The draws at Portsmouth, the draws at Sunderland, the draws at Hull City, the wins on the road at Peterborough, at Charlton and at Lincoln, the home performances earlier in the season against Blackpool and Oxford, the draw against Arsenal kids even in the EFL Trophy with a much changed 11 was a positive performance. Of course, there were some shockers chucked in along the way. First half of the campaign, we looked a bit naive and a bit brittle with a lot of youngsters that were still learning their trade. But I think the January transfer window was really vital. We had a reshuffle in the pack, didn't we? And those players that came in did a really good job in making us more difficult to beat, more streetwise. And I think that's ultimately the reason why we ended up taking the playoff chase to the last couple of games. Yes, we fell short. Yes, we only finished 10th. But isn't it refreshing to be able to watch a Gillingham football team that's approaching the last half dozen games of the season, thinking about how many points and wins we need to get into the top 6 rather than how many we need to stay above the dreaded relegation line. like I say, some really good performances along the way, some really good individual and collective displays as well. Congratulations to all the award winners. We wish all the best to those players that have decided to move on or have been released. The big misses will of course be Jack Bonham, Conor Ogilvie and Jordan Graham, who've all turned down new offers of contracts, but we wish them well and hope that they get the moves that their form over the last year or two have deserved. Thanks as always for watching and listening. I hope you've enjoyed this short summary of the season in a nutshell and my top threes. What you can do is comment down below and give me your top three for each category. Let me know if I'm right or wrong in any of them. I'm sure you will think I'm wrong on most of them, and that's fine. I love talking about football, especially the Gills. Don't forget to continue checking out the Third Tier podcast. Continue to download the Fan Hub app as that continues to grow. I'll be back soon for another episode, but until next time, up the Gills.